So we've heard a lot about the details and the minutiae and the theory behind, the legal theories behind data sharing and experience from the ground in Hamburg. And now I think we might shift it a bit gently to a more political realm. Let's see how that works. My name is Georg Dietz. I'm the editor-in-chief of the New Institute, which had the pleasure to work with Francesca and Mr. Perksen on this project. And maybe just to conceptualize it or contextualize it a bit more to explain why the political aspect is, or the democratic aspect is relevant for the project, and maybe also opens it up a bit more to what Francesca said. So if the question, or Ado Colau said, what's the mother thinking about it? What's the actual use? So I think in the New Institute context, which is an experimental initiative started by the philanthropist and entrepreneur Rickmas in Hamburg a few years ago, and this is, I think, relevant as an experimental initiative. It was situated in the context of the future of democracy. So this, basically, what we heard is a deep dive into a potential future of possible democracy. How would that look like? I guess different. What would be the ways of administrating this democracy? What would be the powers sharing in this democracy? To be seen. But as Mr. Perksen said, this is a very, very sort of small example for a really big question that's big in city scales and federal scale, but really also on a democratic theoretical scale. We see if we can get there, but I just wanted to open up that frame, and I think it would be interesting to explore this question also with Rainer Kattel, who's on the bill, I guess, but he fell ill, so he won't be able to join us. But his aspect or his work is really a lot about new institutions that are necessary for driving that change forward, and I think I would like to revisit that question a bit on the panel. And don't be afraid. I think I have time in mind. So if we went a bit overboard with the presentations before, we won't stretch your patience very much. And in the end, you will be able to ask questions, also more detailed technical questions again, if you want to. So the panel, again, sort of just briefly introduced. Jan Perksen is known. He introduced himself, State Secretary head of the state chancellery in Hamburg, Francesca Bria, innovation economist in the broadest sense, and then Eileen Fuchs, who is working at the, I need to look, head division for data policy, data strategy, and open data at the, and that's important, Federal Ministry for Interior and Community. So you work with your team on general data policy issues, data strategy, data governance, regulation on access to and reuse of government data, broadly speaking. Then Sile Sepp, Director of Operations at My Data Global in Tallinn, international recognized nonprofit promoting human-centric use of personal data for a fair, sustainable, and prosperous digital society. And finally, Anna Dujic of the Ministry for Labor and Social Affairs in Germany, where she heads the Digital Work and Society think tank, I guess, or group, or entity. Previously, she headed the strategy Digital Change and Social Dialogue unit of Olaf Scholz, when he was still at the Ministry of Finance. So, Mr. Perksen, just to start with the background of this New Institute as an experimental institution that actually went somehow to you to experiment together to find out how data could be used as in a democratic sense, how to transform democracy in this context. How would you describe? We heard a lot about also difficulties in public administrations, how to work with, how to produce that change that's necessary. Is an institution like the New Institute kind of not necessary, but helpful to create change within an administration in a city, because it's an outside institution that comes to the city? or how does change usually happen in innovation-driving German administrations?
That's a very good question that will take too long. But no, I think what is very helpful for us is that, as we heard, and it's like Max von Grafenstein said, when you just want to start, you immediately get lost in the jungle. And so therefore it's very important that we have this, with our daily work and all the things we have to do, and at the end of the Corona crisis and the next crisis coming up, and all the daily questions we have, it's very good to have you as outside experts who sort of take us by the hand and help us find the right questions. First of all, have the right questions, and then start to have a few answers and broaden our view and find out. The session we had in March in Hamburg, I thought, was very interesting because we were looking at use cases in the Netherlands and in other places where we figured, oh, they have the same questions. They want to know how do they deal with public parking places, or we would like to know, when we now build all the recharging stations for electromobility in the city, how are they used, where are they standing, how do we use them? And there, for example, I think it's very important to say, okay, if we make a public procurement for that, then we have to make sure that they also share the data with us. And the good thing is to know that there are other, like you said, there are other cities in Europe too dealing with the same questions, and perhaps we can do that together. And that's sort of the good thing for us, that it took us out of routine and helps us hopefully to find some kinds of blueprints and schemes in which we can move on into all the different fields I was describing before.
Okay, so ask the right questions. But also, I guess it's something that we talk a lot about in the data commons working group as well. So third institutions, third parties that sort of get in between public-private problems and kind of help advance maybe outside-driven solutions in traditional power structures, to say it abstractly. We heard a lot about the city. We heard a lot about Europe. What about the federal level, Eileen Fuchs? What's the perspective? What do you sort of reflect on when you hear the city example? What is your sort of description of the role of the federal level in this? Is it helpful or not? And is it driving this innovation or not?
Well, I think that the federal level, of course, is cross-cutting in a horizontal way, since it's setting both as a role model, ideally, if it can be, but also on a meta level when it comes to regulation. So I was very impressed at what Max gave us as a presentation. It's very complex, but I think it's true. So if you translate it to the federal level, I would say that the horizontal goal must be public money, public data. So, and then all the legal obligations come in, so data protection, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we can start on a federal level by saying, okay, look at open data. So opening up open data as such is a goal I think everyone can understand. It's pretty easy to describe. It's something at first that you think, yeah, that should be achieved pretty easily. But in fact, it's not. And the question, why is that so, has kind of been around my unit for the past years. I mean, the EU has done a lot to open up data. And the federal level is, of course, looking at federal administration in the first place, because we can't prescribe the opening up of data for the cities or the communities or for the lender. But so we are working on a law at the moment to open up more data, and we are meeting a lot of technical and organizational constraints. So that I think that needs to be addressed in addition to the legal framework. This is something that we need to discuss more openly within federal government, I think. So we need to talk about data governance structures, how to build it technically, organizationally, how to finance those structures, and then also to work with communities that are already active in doing so. So civil society, we need to talk to businesses about what models they need, and there's been a lot of things going on like IAX, and I really think it's amazing what the EU has done with the Data Spaces Initiative and the Data Spaces Support Center that's up and running now. So I think we need to put this legal perspective and match it with the technical organizational requirements. And then there's one thing I think we haven't spoken about yet, and I think that it addresses all levels of government, is skills and competencies to handle data. And I think that's we have a long way to go there. So perhaps that's in a nutshell what's driving our discussion.
So it seems the federal level is more using data for internal purposes in some way, or for making better services available, or making the services better, at least sort of in the machine, so to speak. The question is then what does Ado Colau's mother see of it? But maybe you, Anna, can explain a bit sort of how the Ministry of Labor, or how you work, or how you conceptualize and practice changing data governance in public or federal administration.
I guess many people in the room are asking themselves, what has the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs to do with data sharing? Maybe in a nutshell, it is the job of our ministry and within the ministry of our unit to assist in the digital transformation of the German labor force, which is a big problem because we are an aging labor force and we are lacking as an economy. We have a lack of labor force and we have basically no natural resources. So if we want to maintain our competitiveness as one of the global leading economies, it comes down to the labor force. How is our skill set? How open, like on a cultural level, how open is the labor force for digital transformation? And how able are the companies to use digital technologies? And there we have to deal with a very broad spectrum in a manufacturing level, on the level of producing industries. We are very competitive on a global level, but as you know, we have a diverse economy that is characterized by a lot of small and medium-sized companies, so-called Mittelstand, that are very often the primary employer in the regions. And when we look at that level, it's less than 10% of the small and medium-sized companies that are, for example, right now using AI. So we have like a long way to go, and we have not that much time on our hands. On the other hand, as the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs, we are, how to put it, one of the major contact point between the world of enterprises and government, or between the world of the citizen and government, because under our belt we have around 20 agencies, the Federal Agency of Labor, Bundesagentur für Arbeit, all the social security agencies. So whenever a company is dealing with government, they are in most cases in touch with one of our agencies, or whenever a citizen is receiving a governmental service on the federal level, Länder level, or community level, it is, in maybe like 6 out of 10 cases, receiving it from one of our agencies from our ministerial family. So if we want to enhance data sharing and the sharing of better data, we have to enable the companies and the individual worker. And on the other hand, if we want to enhance and improve services for the citizens, for the communities, including the whole aspect of social inclusion, the inclusion of handicapped people, etc., we depend on data. So we are in the family of ministries in the federal government, together with our colleague from the Ministry of Interior, one of the most prominent fighters for data sharing, business to government data sharing, because we need more data, we need better data, but we also need more trust in sharing data on every level, the individual level, the company level, the collective government level, particularly in small communities, cities, the Länder. So I was very impressed by what Hamburg is doing. I was not surprised because Hamburg is always among the front runners, but I was like positively impressed because there are a lot of aspects upon which we can build or where we can connect to also show proof that this seeming contradiction between ambitious data sharing but also robust data protection with the benefit for all is actually feasible, and that it's a business case, that it's not only a theoretical discussion, a legal discussion, an intellectual discussion, but that it's like a business case.
So you say trust, and I think it's important to state that underlying all the legal assumptions are cultural values or cultural questions or mindset, as it's maybe called today. And I know that trust is a important term that you use in your work, Sille. If the question is how, I mean, what we discuss is also, if the question is if the data space only replicates existing power structures or conceptual ideas about democracy, which could be the case if it's like an individual ownership of rights. So if that is making up sort of the digital citizen. So if, we spoke a bit before, and you have a different angle, and you come from this digital wonderland, Estonia, anyway. So you're considered the prophet in the room, I guess. So tell us about the future of as you say, collective or more communal, actually, data usage or data governance, and maybe explain the conceptual, your approach to human-centric data governance as maybe opposed or slightly different from what you heard today here.
First of all, thank you also for the invitation. This event has already been so insightful and really great to see all this activity. So in terms of trust, like this is the key word that we hear everywhere around data sharing. I often refer back to years and years back when I heard a presentation from Saskia Sassen that big terms are invitations for laziness. And I really, really love that, because also it's really important that when you talk about trust, we need to start untangling this. What are the pillars for trust? And are those pillars the same for all different types of levels? Are the trust when it's business to customer type of trust, or customer to the business, or is it business to government type of trust, or business to business type of trust? Like, are those different pillars that are creating that same or different? When Max was mentioning about the dynamic nature of value and risks and all that aspect, it's also the context that trust is contextual. So all of this makes it, of course, very complex and difficult, but it's then important to start thinking about when we have different types of rights for the data, then how do you actually give also practical opportunities for saying that what is my interest regarding that data? So coming back to a little bit to the work that we also do in My Data, it's all about human-centric approach to personal data, and obviously it right away leans towards the individual rights and individual control for data. But even more, it's important that individuals get value out of that data. So we talk about the empowerment of data, not so much even directly about wanting to get the data in order to start controlling it. But that individual approach, of course, is embedded into somewhat the European values, and this is great to see all of those developments that are happening in Europe in the recent years. I wouldn't say that it conflicts, but it's important to understand that also those individual perspectives don't fly, if I can say that word, in everywhere globally, because also those aspects of community rights or community aspects that are more prevalent or more important than actually the individual perspective is often the case in many other regions in the world. So what we see is that there's quite a lot of focus put into not only individual governance of data, but also collective governance of data, and how this is then actually done when we also understand that much of the personal data is actually relational and can say much about many other people, not only by us as individuals. I could expand a little bit more on this, but I understand that time is short, so maybe I'll park it here. Thanks.
No, thank you, but I think that's a good segue to what Francesca maybe can explain more, or how you would frame the transformative potential of the commons idea that's very tangible in the data space, how that sort of can, what it is, and how that can mostly transform or grow a different form of understanding of communality or actually democratic practice.
Yeah. No, I think there is no conflicting, there is no conflicts between data sovereignty as in terms of guaranteeing sovereignty of data from an individual viewpoint. So data protection is actually doing that as a framework that we have in Europe, for protecting the fundamental rights, the sovereignty and the information self-determination of the individual. And at the same time, and we met when I was working on the Decode project in Barcelona that was doing actually that. I mean, we were very focused on through cryptography and giving, cryptographic rights to citizens in order to be able to control what data they were keeping private, what data they were sharing, with whom they were sharing data, and to make conscious decisions about the fact that citizens, and that's where the trust is, if I share my transport data with the authority, is because I want to have a better transportation system. It's because I want public transports to work better. So I may want to be sharing the data more with maybe the city or the federal level at the transportation level, but maybe I don't want to share all this data with Uber or with the advertisers or with someone else. So I need to be in control to make decisions that then enhance the public interest and the public good. And that's where the data commons, I think, idea come from, which also is a way to attribute value of data, not only in terms of monetary terms, so not only in terms of market transactions, but in terms of let's say you have an enriched data pool that allow you to provide better services to citizens, yes? And this is a value that needs to be protected. So that's where the community, I think, comes in, but also that's where the public interest comes in. But I have to say something, maybe I have to be the one giving the bad news in this, because I really want to bring it back to one of our very key focus here, which I think you have to take into account. I mean, we have done for many, many years this kind of open data movement. But also, for example, Hamburg has this progressive, it used to be very progressive, this Data Transparency Act. Well, we did a provocation. It's like, well, we are at a moment where we have to do a Business Data Transparency Act, because somehow we seem to be very focused and comfortable to say, we have to open up the public data. We have to give away the citizen data. We have to open up everything public. What about the private data which we create? So, because we are continuously creating collective data, all of us, which ends up in the private hands of corporate monopolies. And I mean, the European Commission was very clear about that. We do not own this data anymore. Because, by the way, all of these companies are non-European. So yes, probably if you are an American citizen, you may be relaxed. I'm not sure even that the American citizen at this point, they like these data monopolies. But as a person that works on marketplaces and innovation economies and data economies for many, many years, I think we are seeing concentrated marketplace that we haven't seen in the history of the Industrial Revolution, And with artificial intelligence is worst. I mean, we are at a point that only 3 companies on the planet can really exploit the value of this gigantic, collected data and knowledge that humanity is producing. Well, if this is not a political question, I don't know what politics is about, I'm sorry. And so we should have this problem that, at this point, we have to regain this public control and democratic control over a fundamental critical infrastructure of our time, which is the knowledge we produce and the data we produce. And yes, I believe we can do it bottom up with cities, with citizens. And by the way, I just wanted to address the question of labor and the working force, because first of all, yes, it is a great place to start, I think. And I've been working with the Ministry of Labor in Italy and also with the Ministry of Labor of Spain in the platform regulation for workers. And that's where we have been saying, for example, and we created a working group, Maria was also there, she's in the audience, and we've been saying, this question of algorithmic transparency and data control from the workers, from the platform workers. Platform workers, it's going to be all of us, yes, in the future. All our work is mediated by digital platforms and by digital tools. So digital labor is a bigger category that's not just the riders and the gig economy. It's going to be everywhere, imagine via AI. So this data, the possibility to create data, public data trust, this should concern the unions, it should concern, employers, it should concern workers. Because otherwise, we don't have the capacity. The algorithm is your boss. It's impacting on collective bargaining, on your workers' rights, on, everything you do on these platforms. And so it's a way, it's an important tool to regain that kind of control. And that's why, I think that the European, we have to start, I think, for me, the approach, we'll discuss it tomorrow in the going deeper into the legal structure. But I want to believe that Europe is putting out a framework that will allow us not to have any more, but, we don't have the regulatory, we need that. No, you have the framework, now do it. Please do it. We actually now get it done in Europe, because we can't keep talking about it. We need an alternative model, I think, and I finish, sorry. That's not the, the data oligopolies from Silicon Valley that we are seeing, because this is also not in line, I think, with the fundamental values, and we don't want to have everything from hospitals to schools to cities run by a few companies. And also, of course, we don't want to get into the big state approach that China has that doesn't respect the individual liberal democracy rights. So we do need another way, and I think it's the European way, but let's get it done. Because otherwise, it seems we're going to talk about it forever, but we don't have the, the examples. So if Germany does it, then all of Europe can do it. That's it.
Okay, that was typically Bria, so yes, call to arms, but slightly depressing, but also true, I guess, full of truth. So I hand over, I guess, to Jan Perksen to answer this dilemma, but with a sort of polite, maybe, segue. So you say Europe, and it's called New Hanse, the project, for a reason, and the question is also, or what Francesca also mentioned, that it fosters Hamburg's ambition to become a European model city for digital transformation. You say, well yeah, but anyway, the point is that there is an opportunity to create a different European reality. So that is the question. So through cities, through progressive cities that sponsor and champion innovative democratic data governance structures. And that's also partly the aim of the blueprint process, to create this basis for a more European approach to data governance as a as a position of power in the city government. How do you see that potential? Are you tired already of thinking about it, or is it something that fires you up, or are you focused on the city first? It seems like a fight on many fronts. So if you fight big tech, and then you fight privacy laws, and well, it's a multi-faceted monster. But where would you would like to go in the next 3 to 5 years? And do you see this European potential at all, realistically?
Well, I think our problem as a city, or the current status, is that for us it's very far away. Even though we have a representative office also in Brussels, it's for us very far away, and as I said before, it's quite complicated. So it would be good for us if we would have a stable, good to understand framework that we could just use to go ahead and do it, like Francesca said. I would like to say two things on what you said, because I think you just put the right question. That's why it's so much fun to work with you, because you, with Italian spirit, you get us going. We do have a very advanced transparency law in Hamburg, but the ones who really profit from it are not the regular citizens, are the architects, are mainly the journalists. We do the work for the journalists, the political opposition, and some other, and also other private companies who profit from it. So I think the question is put totally right. When is the time to say that data is a common good and is part of Daseinsvorsorge? I forgot the English name. A utility. A utility, is that? Utility. Okay. Well, so I think this is really time where we have to say now, if you use, like you said, if you use public infrastructure, then you should also provide your data. Second thing about trust, and what for me is becoming more and more difficult to understand, that we don't really think about that when we drive our cars, our current cars and our new cars, that we give all our data to all kinds of not only to, as we used to TomTom, but we give it to BMW, and we know that the new models is that they want to make business with with our data, driving and so forth, and we don't really think about it. There we don't have a problem. At the same time, when we talk about giving it to public purposes, then we have the whole big trust issue. We had a very interesting discussion last year. We went with our digital leadership group to Copenhagen, and the way, the Scandinavian way, and sorry, I don't want to put Estonia in Scandinavia, but the northern way, northeastern way of trusting in the data aspect makes things much easier than with our sort of ambiguous way of, on one hand, being very skeptical if we give things to the government. And of course, we have history, and we have East German history, and all kinds of things which make it understandable. At the same time, we are very easy in giving it away to companies. And the last thing I want to say is that Google asked us in Hamburg to sort of agree or give a positive feedback to their sharing certain data with the public. And they wanted us to take a stand on it as the city of Hamburg. And we said, we don't. If we are glad if you share your data, go ahead and do that and tell the people where the data is from and how accurate it is and so forth. But we are not going to give you sort of a public quality stamp on it before we really know what is behind it. So this also, if we come to a point, I don't know, where sort of they also have an interest in this, then we really have to make it, then we have to start making a deal and saying, okay, we can do that, but then we really need to understand, and then we need to be on common terms on how we agree, and like slowly we are getting Microsoft with public administration to move and slowly, step by step, to work together with us and change some of the things. I think we have to get the big companies also to change that. I don't know whether it's realistic, but we have to sort of start making precise deals with them. And what the city does comes way afterward. The main thing for us, and I mean Hamburg is big, but the main thing for us and all the other cities is that we don't really need to think about all of it. We just want to do the real life.
I'd like to pick up on something you said, and I talked about cultural values before, and Alina, I don't expect you to explain the German soul or history, sort of mentioned, always present in the room, but sort of privacy as this prized sort of cultural heritage, world cultural heritage of German data protection. So can you explain a bit the problems with it, or the reality of it in your work, or is it the $1 million question? So it seems to be a conundrum. So if there's a reason for it, and then there's a massive problem through it, or maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I'm not actually a data protection lawyer, so perhaps Max should explain better. But I think all of us here that are working with data know that data protection per se is a valuable good. I mean, it's what Francesca said. It's privacy law, and it has a reason, and it's good. I don't want my data to be traded by whoever I don't know. So obviously yes, but I think the way it is handled within administration could be different, and I think that's where we need to focus on. We need to find models to share data while we respect data privacy. So, and I think that the legal structure we have is actually a bit complicated, but I think our jobs as governments or administration is to point to certain lanes and techniques, and to establish models where data sharing can be facilitated easily, while at the same time guaranteeing privacy rights. I think it's not necessarily something that is, it's not rocket science. It can be done.
But it seems key to have a certain mindset established, and that might also already be a basis for a different understanding of how community or society or democracy in that sense works. So I'm curious, also picking up on what Mr. Perksen said, so about the northern mindset. We talked a bit before about exactly that, so of what is needed to incentivize citizens, people, ordinary, sort of customers in a classical sense of whose data is taken away by big tech, usually sort of to share, sort of to trust. To what's the mindset in your experience?
Unfortunately, I need to break the dream of trust in Estonia and elsewhere probably as well. And I can give you a very concrete story from just a story or a conversation that I overheard, but while she's driving with public transport in Tallinn. In Tallinn, we have free public transport, but you need to still validate your driving. And the story is that two ladies then came to the bus, and one was saying like, "Oh, you need to validate." Like, "Oh, why should I give them my data?" And the point was that exactly the thing. While we're driving or while we're interacting in social media or so forth, we don't have any issues about actually sharing that data. But once you have that moment or opportunity to actually control whether you share or not, and you are aware of that, oh, this will be used somehow, but don't necessarily see the value right away, then you might actually decide that, oh, I won't share this because why should they know? It might be an individual case, but I think there's something actually there to unpack, because it's a question of, again, seeing, first of all, of course, untrusting the underlying infrastructures and the governance mechanisms and the interests of those entities that will share the data and use the data, and making sure that this is secure and trustworthy, etc. But the other aspect is really seeing and understanding the value that it brings back to me. And that's why I like that the focus in the project here is also very much on practical use cases, practical, tangible results back to the communities, back to the citizens, because that will also start by time creating a culture that I understand that by sharing that information, I'm improving the lives of the society, but also for me individually. So that's from the context of citizens, but I think that's the same case also for organizations by sharing data. There's the aspect of voluntary data sharing in data spaces. My Data is also one of the partners of Data Spaces Support Center. And in the recent discussions, while Data Spaces is very much in different kind of policy documents, different policy agendas as well, and I completely agree, and I think we generally all agree that this is a valuable development. At the same time, there are voices that where is really the demand from the user side for the data spaces? Because what is why should we share? What do we get back? How is it different from any type of data sharing interactions and current development, so to say. So again, the point about focusing on generating value, and not always monetary value, but also common goods, reduced costs, things like that, and communicating very clearly back both to the companies, both to the different organizations that want to share if it's feasible, and as well back to the actual individuals and communities. So I really like that this generally focuses very much on value, and I think it's necessary. Yeah.
So the responsiveness of democracy as showing that there is a result for ordinary citizens. And maybe from the business side, what's your experience in, well, I don't know if one needs to go as far as Max suggested, but sort of voluntary versus mandatory data sharing on a business side, or general, the willingness of companies. You explored it a bit, but the willingness or the openness of companies to share data.
I think there is a catastrophic lack of knowledge about this topic. Of course, the leading German companies, the car manufacturer Siemens, they have big professional entities that constantly work only on this question, and there is like the 85% of the rest of the companies that are happy to grasp the data protection regulations they need for their respective business. And they don't even know how to share what and for what. So I think we have to increase the level of public debate on this. Also, as a government, I think we have to find a new vocabulary to talk about all of this when we discuss expectations of citizens, but also when we discuss how government can organize this upcoming digital society and data-based economy. And even more so because, I can say it for my ministry, we see a direct connection between the future of democracy and the question of how do workers perceive their level of freedom and agency at the workplace. I think what Francesca just said, like the algorithm will become your boss, and for some workers it is already the boss. So there is extreme level of fear and distrust when people experience at the workplace that they are not autonomous anymore, that they are monitored, while in Germany we also measured a relatively high level of openness towards digital technologies, but we are approaching a very sensitive phase now in the digital transformation. So that's why I'm happy to sit on this panel with my colleague from the Ministry of Interior, because our two ministries will introduce a bill in September on data protection laws for workers. Because we want Beschäftigtendatenschutzgesetz, because we want more and better data in companies, we need more transparent data protection for workers, but also more collaboration rights for labor units. Also when it comes to the design of the technology. But also we want to streamline the various regulations that exist. But coming back to the issue of democracy, I think if we want to gain for the next 10, 15 years democratic majorities in democratic societies for the decarbonization of our economies, we will only have these democratic majorities if people perceive in their workplace, in their interaction with government, that at least the digital transformation in their daily work, life, at schools, in healthcare system, etc., if that is working. Because if they perceive in the daily life as a citizen and as a worker, well, they are not even able to manage this. How on earth will they decarbonize our economy? So there is a very direct link in that.
Okay, so before opening up the floor, I asked Francesca to give us the optimistic rundown of the next 3 years.
Well, when the others were speaking, I was thinking that we lack a lot of imagination about also thinking of next generation public digital infrastructures. Yes, because it's like somehow we don't have many. I have to give you the news, like we don't have much. And I think also that's why somehow I was thinking the citizens feel more comfortable, of course, to share with the companies because that's the options they have. And I don't think they're thinking, oh, do I need a European data space? No, they have Google Cloud. And do I need a European? No, they have the infrastructures provided privately by the companies. And while we were good enough to conceive the post office, libraries, public parks, public institutions, somehow in the digital era, we have lost imagination. We don't know how future public digital infrastructures will look like. And I think that's why we are losing the digital public sphere. And this should be a country, having Habermas still alive, where you should be concerned about the fact that we are losing the public sphere. And that's where democracy risk, I think for me, it's very obvious. And just to reconcile this question about privacy and privacy-enhancing technology, in my view, future digital public infrastructures are in fact, privacy-enhancing. So with privacy-enhancing technologies, they will be more on the kind of decentralized or federated or distributed level because we don't like such concentration of power. And probably with interoperability, open standards, open source software, and so on. And that's, I think, the European way. And also public software, public money, and public data, public money, this kind of thing. And yes, this is a model, but we need these infrastructures in place. And I think maybe connecting to Anna, it's the industrial digital policy that we are missing in Europe. That's why we do not have these things. And that's why we don't have workers involved in designing these technologies. So maybe that's what we have to do in the future, but opening up our imagination, because otherwise we are stuck in, oh my God, yes, I give this data to the government and they will be terrible with it because we don't know and they probably don't have the skills and the capacity to think in a different way. And that's maybe why we need communities, we need people that know what to do, we need startups, innovators to help build these next generation infrastructures. And just one thing to close it and then give it to the audience. I think when it comes to make it done, not only we need these blueprints and framework, but also let's try to actually, if we don't have the universal data sharing law, Max, if you don't succeed soon in this great endeavor, I will help you. But if we don't, we do have ways to, let's put data sovereignty and let's put these clauses in conditionality when we give public funding. I think there is somebody from KFV in the audience. You're giving all this money to smart cities. Why don't we get the data back? And why don't we get maybe the data governed in a way that will allow, data commons to be created while you're creating smart cities? If we do procurement, big contracts, why don't we get the data out of procurement? When we do the smart, energy columns in the city, licensing schemes, why don't we put these clauses there? And I guess the European Commission will be very happy with standardized European procurement when we also have these clauses built in, as we do with gender equality, with environmental laws, with workers' rights. Let's also put the data rights. So I think it's achievable in that sense, but we have to move. We have to get things done. Again, I'm sorry, I will close with this get things done. We have examples, but we have to, probably that's why these projects work, to kind of accelerate on the level of commitment.
Well, that's optimistic. So, on that note, I'm happy to open up the floor for questions. Maybe you can introduce yourself briefly if you want to, privacy-wise. Otherwise, not. And you can address questions to the panel or one panelist. And we should close at 8:30 for everybody's sake.
Yeah, my name is Henry Steiner. I'm a journalist and working at iRight's lab, and in a project called Move Mobility, we report about data-driven projects. And I'd like to give a little good example how these projects could be innovative. Some people from, I think, the city of Erfurt told me about a project that they want to collect data about the road infrastructure for cars as well as for bikes or pedestrians. And they thought, which kind of cars are going through every street in the city every week? The municipal cleaning cars. So they installed the camera and took pictures from these roads, not like Google cars every 3 years, but maybe every week. And that's the point. If these data are public and public owned, you can work with it in many, many cases. So the problem, they told me, are the union. They said, oh, if we have data about every drive with every car from the cleaners, you can watch what the drivers, where they're lazy or where they're very busy. But I think this is a little problem to anonymize or whatever these data, because nobody is interested in a single drive, but in the data they collect. And I mean, this is a public infrastructure, this is public money, and they go to the street, to every street, every week. And so it's not really a question, but maybe an example. How could it be in the future if the public data is really free to use? Thank you.
That's a very good example. I think, does anybody want to react or?
Quick response. I think it's an excellent example to illustrate the benefit of data sharing. I can only encourage, it was iRight's lab, have I understood correctly? Yeah, we're working with them also. To seek a dialogue with the unions, because they themselves understand if they want to empower the individual worker, but also collective rights, but also if they want to sustain a competitive economy with good wages, fair work, etc., they need data literacy as well. So there are a lot of people right now on all levels in the unions who are very open for that kind of dialogue. And if the city of Erfurt needs some assistance to connect these people, just will help.
Totally
Should be on.
Yeah, I totally support what Anna said. I mean, it's a matter of skill, and I think we're all talking. Yeah, but we're on a very high level of expertise talking about this, but I think we meet many people who actually are just afraid of what's happening because they don't know what's happening with the data. So that's the one point, yeah, we need to really raise the skill set there, but and explain more, and explain it in a way that people understand what we mean. But to perhaps add to the public vehicles, why only public vehicles? Why wouldn't we include all vehicles that are passing these streets? And I mean, more and more vehicles are they're producing data, and the data is then actually collected by the manufacturers of the cars to make money from that data. They sell it then. So why not collect it from all the vehicles that are going across those roads, and see if we have potholes or how we can develop new services regarding infrastructure. I mean, something I would really think it's worth talking about when we talk about public goods and utilities.
Yeah, no, I guess you would need a specific sort of entity to do that, like to innovate from within. Please.
Thank you so much. Hello. Not sure. Yes, it's working. Hi, my name is David Schimmert. I'm head of data economy at Bitkom, but I will ask a question in my private capacity. Maybe that's important to say. I see a few kind of social democrat-related people on the panel, given their function or given their political function. So I wonder, what is the main reason that we don't see a data union, as we see a similar kind of thing in workers' unions? It seems like something that could maybe help. It's not something we see in the market or anywhere. And of course there's probably like technical, organizational, collective action issues why it doesn't exist. But maybe what is the main one? Thank you.
I don't know, Anna, but like my view is that why don't we get the actual unions on board? Because it's like, I always thought, I mean, to be honest, I mean, why do we need a specific data union if actually what we are talking about permeates, you know, a lot of different questions about our workers' rights? I think we should get a serious, I mean, like my experience, but the unions, of course, are not all the same. So I think there are some people, as Anna was saying now, really getting up to the topic and being interested and competent. But some of the unions, they really lack the basic capacity and expertise, not only to have this kind of conversation, but imagine to do algorithmic auditing. You know, when I see the European Commission, I'm like, yeah, fantastic. I mean, this is great. We're going to do audits and we're going to do transparency and so on. But who has the capacity to do that? And then again, we go to the problem that, oh, yeah, well, maybe we should ask Facebook and Google and so on. And then, you know, the problem continues. So I think we should get capacity there. And I think the unions have to be on the table. They have to basically, so I don't think we need a data union. We need unions to start talking and taking seriously this kind of thing.
Absolutely. I think in Germany, at least I can say it for the major unions and for the umbrella organizations, they are at the table and they are very involved in this issue because in the end it's about power. It's about distribution or redistribution of wealth. And there is no labor right issue, wages, participation, upskilling, health at the workplace that is today not related to data, the use of data or the use of technology. And the fact that they are at the table right now doesn't mean that they don't need to improve their level of information and negotiation technique in that field. But that is also the gloomier part of the truth. A large part of the current economy, even in a relatively high unionized economy as Germany, is not represented by unions. We have a large problem in the platform economy. Like everywhere where unions are present, the manufacturing industries, like classic automotive, etc. We have very strong unions with like good tariff treaties. There we don't have a problem because they are very much aware of the issue, they are highly informed, they are very involved. But we have large parts and many sectors where we don't have unions at all. The whole startup world is absolutely disconnected from collective bargaining tradition, etc. And a lot of particularly young people working in those industries, companies, sectors, they're not even aware of certain rights they have.
To make the social democratic round complete.
You have this law in Germany, which we would like, I mean, we took it as an example all the time when we think about what's the next with the data, which is co-determination. I mean, I think it's about redesigning co-determination today, introducing those issues. So, I mean, you've done it here, so.
Okay, 1, 2 last questions, brief questions. Before we go down to the buffet.
Good evening, hello everybody. My name is Dominic Pietron from Humboldt University. I also had the pleasure to participate in the working group. And now that we get there to talk directly with officials or about how to transfer data from private platform companies to the public sector. I think we can even push it one step further. Let's differentiate between secondary data sharing and primary data sharing. So I want to talk about interoperability, and especially in the field of mobility, interoperability is the key to create this integrated mobility system where we can switch easily from one mode to another and let the car where it is, right? The problem now is that we have a fragmented mobility platform sector where we have each data silo again, where it's not possible to rent a car from a private company because they don't offer their cars on public platforms. So when we talk about interoperability, and I think the EU Commission is already thinking about this when you think when you take the proposal for the revision of the ITS directive, they make some claims in this direction, and I'm curious to hear more about it. Yeah, why don't we have talked about open standards, open APIs. Let's not just share data which is already used in a sense. Why don't we just use the direct data relation between the users and the infrastructure and link it to a software which is also publicly owned? And then we have much more direct control on how to design mobility ecosystems and so on. So interoperability, like in the Fediverse, like the EU Parliament is trying to implement it in social media now, is also something we have to talk about in the mobility field. Sorry. So, and this needs open standards and some sort of primary data sharing, not just secondary data sharing. Thank you.
Okay, for me there was closing statement enough. So a very optimistic closing statement from the working group, very good pro domo advertisement. So from my part personally, thank you for the round, thank you for your attention from the part of the New Institute, thank you City of Hamburg, Francesca, for the tremendous work all these years. And let's see what comes out of it. Thank you, and downstairs are drinks and, as I hear, food. So enjoy. Thank you.